We're going to talk about the design process and the different types of documents that designers create throughout the space planning process that really leads us to that final space plan, floor plan that we all think of as the end result. There's a lot that goes on until we get there to get the best result. So one of the first things that we want to talk about is adjacency. So before you even get to where you are drawing something on paper, you will have talked with your client, you've asked them the questions about what do they need in this space, how do they use this space, what issues do they have with this space, and if there is more than one space, so if you're not just doing the kitchen or just doing the dining room, like if you're doing the whole house or the first floor, or if you're doing a full office space, then you need to understand what spaces should go next to each other. And that's what adjacency refers to. Certain things need to be right next to each other. So, for instance, you typically want the dining room and the kitchen right next to each other so that that works. You want the master bathroom and the master bedroom right next to each other. But others can be down the hall, and some of them you don't want next to each other at all. So, you may not want the master bathroom right next to the living room. You may want some separation from those two things. So all of that comes out with a programming phase. You want to make sure, like, as you understand adjacency, then you will ask some questions that go along with that. Sometimes your programming, especially in businesses, you may actually observe how the people work, so you understand a little bit of that as well. An adjacency matrix is one way that you can help organize the information in a visual format. So I'm going to show you one or two different types of adjacency matrices. There is not a set way that you have to do this, but these are just some examples of how it may work, because as designers, visual items help us lots of times as it goes through. So here is one example of an adjacency matrix. So they've started with the user needs analysis, which is down here. So they've gone through each area. So you have an associate's office, director's office, manager's office, etc. They've asked how many people are typically in that space. The designer has determined the square footage requirements based on this other information. So how many people are in it, what type of furniture is in it, how's it used, all of that. So they have all of this that goes in. And then along with this, they've created an adjacency matrix. So the way this works, they're a little confusing to read at first, but then once you understand them, they all function fairly similarly. So you've got the associate's office, directors, managers, etc. So these lines, as you come to the associate's office, this diagonal line coming up down here represents the associate's office. You go to the director's office, and then this diagonal line going down represents the director's office. Also, this diagonal line going up is the director's office. So that lets you see where this line going up for the director's office intersects with the line going down for the associate's office. And at that point, they've listed what the adjacency needs to be, or if it's needed at all. Some of these, it does not matter, and so that's why it's left blank. Like it can be adjacent or not. But for this one, they are saying the filled in circle is primary. So that means these do need to be right next to each other. Let's kind of go down a little further to see if this helps as we get not right next to each other. But so you've got your work area, and you've got where it's going up here, it's going down here. And then as you come across, what you can do when it intersects this line is you can follow that row back up to the manager's office. So you know that the work area and the manager's office needs to be right next to each other. Then for the secondary, for the work area, you go up, it needs to have a secondary adjacency to the directors. So what that means is first priority next to the work area is the manager's office. Second priority would be the director's office. Okay. Um, this is another example here. They've listed a major adjacency, a minor adjacency, and then this means the empty ones, it just not closely related. So they can be next to it if it works out, but they don't have to. So for example, if we're looking at the adjacency between the interior director and the interiors department, which one is that? So we're going to come up, we're going to find the interiors director. Their line goes down through here. We're also going to look at the interiors department, which goes up. So they're right next to each other. So this is where they join as I go up and then go down. And this is a minor adjacency. Okay, if we look again about the entry and the reception, so you've got entry right here, reception go up here. That's a major adjacency. Just because these two lines are next to each other, like that doesn't always mean that the actual spaces are next to each other. So you see, because that's some of our examples that did work out that way. But like the boardroom is next, or no, so let me skip. The presentation space and the boardroom, those don't necessarily have to be next to each other. Okay. So the last one, the boardroom and the finance and human resources. So we've got the boardrooms coming down through here, and then finance and human resources comes across here. So that one is a blank, so it means not closely related. So again, they do not have to be next to each other. On an adjacency matrix, just going back real quick, you do want to kind of understand how to read them. You do not have to use this as you're planning on it, okay? So we will practice it just so you understand how it works, but they're not required. There's different ways that you can talk through that. So once you have your adjacency information, you understand the relative size of the needed spaces. So you understand like that one office is bigger than the next, or that the kitchen is bigger than the dining room, that sort of thing. Then you're going to start with your bubble diagrams. You always should have more than one bubble diagram. All right. These should be done very quickly so you can do options. It's the same way when you're writing a paper. You should write a draft. You should edit it. You shouldn't just write it and hand it in. Now we've probably all done that at some point, and sometimes you luck out and you don't have very many mistakes and you get a good grade. Other times you don't luck out and you've made a lot of mistakes as you go through it. So bubble diagrams, going through those, these are really the way that you're editing and you're reviewing your options. The more that you play with the layout of the space, it gives you opportunities to see better options as you go through that you may not have seen the first time. Yes, your first one may fit everything and it may have the adjacencies, but when you move some things around, then you might see an even better layout as it goes through. These can either be sketched by hand or done quickly on the computer. The bubbles shouldn't be to scale. So you don't need to get out your architectural scale and make sure that, you know, your office space that is 100 square feet is actually 100 square feet. It's just proportionate. So if you have a space that is 300 to 400 square feet, that bubble should be roughly twice the size of one that's 150 to 200. Okay, and lots of times you are going to have ranges with this as it goes through. You can do this on a computer as well. If you're doing a computer, lots of times you can just put in one of those numbers in there because you're going to put a size to it anyways, and then you just kind of move it around. But really, this is looking at your basic layouts. You want to focus on your adjacency and the traffic flow. So how are people getting as they go through here? So these are some examples of bubble diagrams along with the traffic flow. So the first example on the left, they've given you a thick line for your major traffic flow and then a thinner line for the minor traffic flow. But you do want to think, okay, as people come into reception, where are they going from here? You know, where are their main spaces? Because that allows you to work on your design and understand where that is. They've also noted where the view is, so where the main where the best view is out of it. So that helps as well as you go through it. So you understand, like, the boardroom, you want people to have a good view there, that kind of thing. The second one is another example. They have just shown traffic flow just in general. So they haven't said what's major or minor, but they have these spaces and they're showing it. And so you're seeing kind of in this work area, for example, there's lots of traffic coming in and out of that to different areas. So that helps you know you probably don't want just one single doorway into the work area. You probably want a larger opening or several doors because there is a lot of traffic. So this gives you a lot of really good information as you go through it. After you do your bubble diagrams, you're going to move on to blocking diagrams. So with that, you're going to take the shape of the building into consideration. So if you'll notice on these bubble diagrams, these aren't laid out within a shape of an actual building. They're just kind of laid out. And they have noted like where the view is. You might note where the main entrance is, that sort of thing. But with blocking, you're going to actually put it into the shape of the building. Your space shapes will change to fit the building shape. Again, it's rough measurements. You don't need to be exact. And you again want to do at least 2 to 3 of these. You can do more. Remember to put in spaces for like corridors, common areas, stairwells, that sort of thing. But you can see the difference. So it's called blocking, but these are still very loose. But for example, this architecture, if you were doing it with a bubble diagram, it may have just been a large circle. But now that we have it in the building space, they've kind of squished that along one side. Yes, it's a technical term, squish. But they've done that to leave space for corridors and stairwells, that sort of thing. They've also noted where the core spaces are. So lots of times that's where your mechanical rooms or your elevators, that sort of thing might be. This one, they have also shown the traffic patterns in here. So you get a feel for where things are going. And again, they've left space. And both of these, they've kind of filled in that space, shaded it in some way to know that it's intentional for the corridor. This one is not filled in, so it could just, these two can bleed together. They don't necessarily need a corridor, but all of this needs corridor space going around it to have access. So how do you know the square foot of each space? If someone just says, hey, I need 3 offices, how do you know what size it's going to be? Or a living room? Over time, you will start to know what some of these standard sizes are. But to start, and especially if it's a project that's out of the norm, you're going to work with test fits, and that's going to determine the size you need for each space. So you're going to start with the small individual spaces. So they're going to include major furniture and equipment in the space. You're going to lay it out with the most efficient way, make sure there's circulation. So we're going from this large area in the building to one office. And you're going to lay out a desk and a desk chair and a couple of guest chairs and a file cabinet and make sure that everyone can get where they need in that. You may have more than one option. That's perfectly fine. That's going to give you a range. So once you lay those things out and then draw a square around them or draw a rectangle, that's going to give you what that size is. So then you would know, okay, I need, 100 square feet or etc. Okay, so let's talk through like what this might look like. If you have a client that needs 3 offices for managers, they let you know the managers work by themselves. They might meet with 1 to 2 people at a time in their office. They need storage space. They have a laptop, dual monitors, seating, whiteboard, space to hang a coat, etc. Okay, so this is telling you what needs to go in there. And what this lets you know is, do I need a desk and a couple chairs, or do I need a desk and a completely separate seating area with a sofa and 2 armchairs and a meeting table all in one space? So from there, you can start to work with your furniture options. So You might have a desk and a return back here with a storage cabinet. You might have an L-shaped desk. You could have another L-shaped desk with a smaller meeting table over here. So those all are some options that'll work. You've made sure you've got the clearances here, like between the desk and the walls. And as you draw the walls around that, that lets you know it could be anywhere from 11 foot by 12 and a half foot. This one's 11 by 11 roughly, and this one's 15 feet by 10 feet. So that lets you know kind of what your range is that you're working with. So you will do test fits more as you are starting with spaces. You can also do this in a dining room. And with homes, you may do this more often, especially as you're working in individual homes, because they can vary greatly depending on what your client is looking for. So for this example, we've got a client. They've asked for a dining room with entertaining their large family. They have around 10 people at least once a week. It says the meals are the center with the food served family style. And they want comfortable seating and wine cabinet in the room. They also want to showcase their china, which only gets used a couple times a year, but they want that in there. Okay, so that gives you some things to know as you go through it. So here's a couple of examples. I did not label the pieces in here, but so both of these give large tables for 10 people. So it could be either rectangular or circular. You could also do oval, but this gives you a basic. And then I've included space for a wine cabinet as well as their china storage they've talked about in both of those. So that gives you an example and lets you know roughly what the space would look like for each of these. And then with that, that'll help you know within the house or the space you're working in what's actually going to fit in. For houses, you could also do it kind of the other way. So if you have a rectangular space that is what's been given for the dining room, or a square space, that will help you kind of determine with a test fit, do I need a rectangular table? Do I need a circular table? What's going to work as we go through it? So all of those steps are important. And as we said, as I mentioned, you're going to want to do them more than once. To really understand what the options are, and that allows you to give the best layout for your client.